Okay, cool. And now I'm going to make us go live. All right, so we're about to live stream. We'll get right into this once this is up. Hopefully it's already connected and it's just not telling us. As questions come through on the Facebook, I'll let you guys know what they are, but it looks like we're on. So hi, everybody. Welcome to the Find Your Therapist panel. I'm the host for tonight, Danielle Massi. The reason why I'm hosting this panel is because I'm a former licensed psychotherapist, but I no longer practice therapy. And a lot of people within the Walnut Club have been asking the question about how to find a therapist. Because people have been asking that question so often during our group meetups, Marla and I thought it would be a great idea to actually have a panel that answered this question and went a little bit deeper in talking about the different types of therapists, where you can find a therapist, and more. So I brought in 3 of the absolute best therapists that I know. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but quickly, starting from, I think everybody should be seeing this the same way I am right now. On the top with me here is Dr. Allison Chabot. Below is Laura Brown from the Wellness Collective, and right next to her is Tiffany Hall. So Allison, if you don't mind starting, can you tell everybody a little bit about you?
Yes. Hi, I'm Dr. Allison Chabot, except for I just go by Allison.
Have I been mispronouncing your last name all this time?
It's
I'm
totally
so
fine.
sorry.
It's totally fine. You know me on Facebook by my middle name as well. So I am a licensed psychologist. I've been in practice for 20 plus years. I'm not sure how long. I graduated from Temple University with my PhD in clinical psychology, and have done a little bit of work in hospital settings and with, medical trauma and things like that. I'm currently in private practice. Was in the same building with Danielle for many, many years without realizing it. And I would say probably the last 7 years or so, I've been going through kind of a spiritual transformation, which is how I even crossed paths with Danielle. And been doing a lot of deep meditation and yoga and different kinds of therapy work, and became a Reiki master recently. So I specialize in working with individuals, women who are going through a spiritual awakening. I also have a lot of older individuals in my practice, 60s, 70s, 80s. I love learning from people who are, retired and people in college. And yeah, I love my work. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. All right, let me move over to Laura Brown. Laura, tell us a little bit about you.
Yes. Hi. And Danielle, thank you for having me.
Of course.
I am Laura Brown. Can't mispronounce that one. Easy. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I'm one of the therapists with the Wellness Collective, actually. I did my master's program at Jefferson University here in Philly, and we did our clinical work through the Council for Relationships, or CFR. So I spent some time with them, now in private practice with Danielle. I do, as a marriage and family therapist, a lot of couples work, but I also do work with individuals. I work specifically when doing couples work, I work a lot with the Gottman method, EMT, and I'm sorry, did I just say EMT? EFT, there we go.
It's getting
I also do coaching as well. The Wellness Collective, as many of you know, is a holistically based practice with many different types of clinicians. And so my coaching tends to be more sort of on that holistic side, but sort of depending on the specific needs of a client. If it's a life transition, if it's a medical issue, whatever that is. So I offer both at the moment and working virtually, all virtually now.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Laura. And then let me move over to Tiffany Hall.
All right. Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me. So I'm Tiffany. I have been a practicing marriage and family therapist since 2012. Me and Danielle met in grad school many moons ago, and I've been in private practice now since 2019. Before that, I worked in community mental health. I worked for an AIDS service organization, which I really loved. I am also EMDR trained, so I specialize in treating trauma in relationships. I work with a lot of women and queer folks, And I really am trying to integrate more of the somatic and mind and body stuff too. So I've been training in the trauma conscious yoga method, which I'll be finishing soon. So I'm kind of excited to get people to be more comfortable with therapy because I think it's beneficial for me. It's been part of my self-care practice, in addition to yoga and other things. So I really want folks to be able to experience the benefits of it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tiff. The reason why I chose these three therapists in particular is because each one of them is multifaceted. No one is completely pigeonholed into one specific sect, and so they can answer questions more fully than maybe someone else might be able to. So let's kick off tonight with a couple of mental health facts that might surprise everyone. So I got these from the NMDI. So the first one is that in any given year, 1 in 5 employed adults in the US experience a mental health issue, including depression, anxiety, and insomnia. Worldwide, 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health issue in any given year. 1 in 25 adults, or 9.8 million Americans, will experience a mental illness this year that is serious enough to interfere with or impact major life activities. And you are more likely to experience mental illness than you are to develop heart disease, diabetes, or any kind of cancer. Those numbers are startling. And the fact that we don't talk about mental health enough and the treatment options that we have is disheartening. So this panel is more important now than it ever has been before. So if you guys have questions during this conversation, you can type them right here into the Facebook group. I know that we're on Zoom, but I can still see your questions. Feel free to put them up and I'll add them onto the list. But what we're going to do right now is just kind of go around and talk to each specific person and ask them a question that they can shed some light on. So we're going to start with Allison for the first question. And I know that you mentioned that you're a clinical psychologist. So I know that a lot of people get this confused with psychiatrists. So can you speak to what the difference is?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, it's commonly confused. A clinical psychologist is somebody, a licensed clinical psychologist is somebody who has either a PhD or a PsyD in psychology. There are lots of other counselors and therapists, but when you specifically say psychologist, that's different than a psychiatrist, which is someone who went to medical school and can prescribe medication. And historically, like in the age of Freud and so on, it was actually the MDs, the psychiatrists who did both therapy and medication. And now it's more likely to be kind of like a split treatment where you talk to your psychologist or your therapist or counselor, and you get medication from a psychiatrist or maybe even a nurse practitioner or somebody who specializes in medication treatment.
Yeah, that's so important to differentiate because I don't think a lot of people understand that they're not going to be speaking to their psychiatrist. And I have seen a lot of people get very disappointed after a psychiatrist appointment that they got maybe 15 minutes with the person and a prescription, and then were kind of nudged out the door.
Yeah, a couple of things can be disappointing about psychiatry visits. One is that the first one, they ask you, do you hear voices? Are you going to kill yourself? They ask you these kind of horrifying questions as well. So I like to let people know beforehand what they might hear. And then, yeah, the follow-up visits are quite short. It's important to know that the standard of care is that your therapist and your medication prescriber really should be talking between sessions if possible. It's just what I do is I get permission, written permission, and then I remind people that I'm going to be leaving, at least leaving a voicemail for your psychiatrist before each of your visits with them. So they have kind of an up-to-date idea of really how you're doing and what's going on.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that. That was really helpful. All right, so let me move on to the next question then. This one's for Tiffany. So Tiffany, you're an LMFT, a licensed marriage and family therapist. How does an LMFT differ from other types of therapists?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So a licensed marriage and family therapist is what's called a master's level therapist, meaning that, I went to graduate school for 2 years, got a master's in family therapy. So a lot of the work that LMFTs do is similar to that of like a social worker, an LCSW, or licensed professional counselor, but the see, the theoretical sort of perspectives are different. Marriage and family therapists were trained in systems theory, and we learn more about how relationships play a role in our mental health and how we as individuals play roles in our relationships. So a lot of the work is similar, just a lot of the perspectives are different amongst different mental health professionals.
Yeah. And I think something that happens over time after you get that graduate degree in 2 years is you go on and get more certifications and specializations, and it becomes less of a different perspective the longer you've been doing the work
Oh
because you're
yeah.
going to shift. Yeah. I see that all the time, don't you?
Yeah, it shifted a lot, just I think just in my experience over the last 10 years. I mean, and I'm sure you as well. I think as you kind of grow professionally and you find different interests and work with different people, you realize, okay, I want to do more of this type of therapy. And so, yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Okay, so piggybacking off of that question, Laura, you're also a marriage and family therapist. Can you explain the role of specializing in certain types of therapy? Things like Gottman work, EMDR, CBT. What does that even mean?
Yes. First, I want to address couples work actually really quick. And maybe this is like a shameless plug for us MFTs, but a lot of people don't know, like Tiffany said, MFTs, LCSWs, LPCs, like we all do a lot of very similar work. However, if you're looking for couples work, you probably want to stick with a marriage and family therapist or somebody who, whatever their master's was, like if it's like Tiffany said, sort of systems focused. There are a lot of therapists, and there's nothing wrong with this, a lot of therapists who do not work with couples, whether they don't necessarily want to. Couples are a lot of work. I'm in a relationship that takes a lot of work, so I get it. But who don't want to, or who don't necessarily have the tools to work with a couple. So there's that. But also in terms of specializing, right? So after you get out of school, if you kind of find a focus that you're personally interested in, or that you just kind of want to drill down more into, therapists are going to tend to start to specialize as they move through their practice. For example, Danielle mentioned the Gottman method. This is a very particular couples therapy modality. This is a couples therapy method that really focuses on, a lot of the couples therapy focuses on similar things like disarming, toxic sort of verbal conflict. It addresses communication. I can't tell you how many times a day I say that word in my couples work. Communication, but there's very particular things about the Gottman method that people really like, and that's why they come looking for it. EMDR, Tiffany's is trained in EMDR. It's as she mentioned, a specialization that's focusing on trauma. There's one thing that we actually, all of us were talking about before we got started here on this panel, that it is very common for a client to come in to a session, to your first session, and say, hey, I want to do CBT, or I want to do the Gottman method or EMDR, whatever that is. Okay. My question is, what do you know about that specialty? Why is it that you want to work on that thing? A lot of people don't actually necessarily, like CBT, for example, they don't really know what that means, what the focus is going to be. They may have read about it. It's very popular. They may have a friend who saw a CBT therapist. It is important. It can be important and really helpful to find a therapist who specializes. Most of us, I think, will attest to that. Like we all have our specialties, but it's important to know why you're looking for that specialty. Do you need to learn more about it? What it is about that specialty that you're looking to gain? And kind of depending on your needs and your issues is like where you are going to want to sort of look for somebody who specializes. If you have trauma, right, you're going to want to find a trauma-focused, trauma-informed therapist. But just sort of do your homework and be aware of like what it is, why you're looking for that specialty, what it is about it that you're looking for.
That's such a good point. It actually reminds me of, I have a friend who's a doctor at Pennsylvania Hospital here in the city. And he comments all the time about how people come in and say, I want to take this medication. And when you get to why, it's like, I've seen so many commercials about that medication, so it must be good. And when we take the decision about treatment away from the professional and put it into the hands of the client, who doesn't really have the background to understand what it is and why they're looking for that thing, we actually do ourselves a disservice at that point. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And then to the point about couples therapy, being from someone who's actually a couples therapist, I'm really glad that you said that. I should have put that in the questions because I see that all the time. It's really important to have that understanding of how to work with couples. It's like learning how to be a ninja.
Yeah, it really feels like that, because I mean, I agree with Laura. It's a lot. It's hard work, as the experience is completely different doing individual and couples. And I wanted to sort of add to what you were saying. Is I've got the question a lot about, folks will ask like, well, do you work with individuals too? Like, you know, marriage and family therapists don't just work with couples, don't just work with families. We work with people with all sorts of human experiences. It just so happens that we have a specialty in working with basically people in relationships. And that could be romantic, familial, platonic, you know.
Polyamory. I hate
Yeah.
that it's marriage and family therapy because it doesn't.
Yeah. Aren't they trying to change that? I heard they're trying to change
I hope
it.
so. Yeah, they were putting legislation forward. We'll see what actually comes of it. But it's
Yeah.
just that relational viewpoint. How do you relate to other people and what does that do for you? Well,
Thank
all
you.
right.
Tiffany. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah. People will come a lot and say like, are you sure you see individuals as well? You know, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, and that's definitely the kind of stuff that we want to clear up tonight. All right, so my next question then is for Allison. So we know that there are other types of therapists who are not represented tonight, like licensed professional counselors and social workers. What would you say the importance of understanding someone's degree type is when looking for a therapist? And this question feels pretty appropriate after talking about what we just did.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the question. I agree with what Tiffany said, that I think it was Tiffany that said that people will start to specialize and get certifications after their original master's degree. And so it matters less and less as time goes on. So a licensed professional counselor is an LPC. That's someone that has a master's degree in counseling, in psychology or counseling. An LCSW, there's an LSW, licensed social worker, but someone who can actually do therapy is an LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. And that's also a master's degree. I have to say, just as a matter of distinction, that I do see people who want a PhD. They want to see somebody who has a PhD or maybe a PsyD, and each of those is a doctorate degree, which means like 7+ years of school after college. And I have found over and over again that that's almost a matter of elitism, of someone saying, you know, and it's easy for me to say because I have the PhD, but I find that it doesn't make that much of a difference. What it means is that someone who's been in school longer, they may have more of a scientific, logical kind of brain. They may, because, you know, there's a lot of research, there's a dissertation, there's all that stuff. That does not make you a better therapist. I don't even need to whisper that. That does not make you a better therapist. So I just like, you know, when I'm giving out referrals and someone says, oh, I only want to see someone with this degree, I'm like, okay, we can start there, but let's open our minds. And I think that this question may be coming up a little bit later, but it's really more about fit. And I'll leave it at that because I think people are going to elaborate on that a little bit more. So sure, do your research and find out what that means to have certain degrees. I think when it matters is just like Laura was saying, if it's someone who actually knows what they're doing with marriage and family work, that's when it's important. And I can attest to that. I only see individuals. Occasionally somebody will say, you know, can my husband come with me or can my partner come with me? And I really have to explain, like, yeah, we can have a conversation and we can, you know, for a couple of sessions, talk about some of the things that are going on, but I don't do couples work. It is a specialty and it is not something to just dabble with.
No, that's a really good point. Thank you for explaining that so eloquently. That was amazing.
I love that Allison just said that. I want to comment on that really quick because I have a personal story with this. My mom, supports me and what I do for a living. I think she thinks I'm smart, but she actually was asking me really recently for a referral. Oh, sorry, mom, I'm like putting her biz out there. But she said to me, I really only want a PhD or a PsyD. Please don't refer anybody else to me. And she totally admitted it. Like she said, she feels like she just something about that title before the therapist, like she just kind of feels like she's in better hands. But she fully admitted like that's not necessarily fair. But that's just that's her choice. And that is, how she feels about it. But Allison, I love that you as a PhD could sort of speak to that and like the importance of, okay, like, but also let's keep our, minds open, but understanding like, why is that important to someone?
Yeah, it always
Yeah, I
comes
find
down to
it's,
that piece. Mhm.
it is. And I find that it often is people who are, I can't even say in an older generation because I'm 50, but like people who are of a certain age want that specialty without really understanding why. Sometimes I think it's a little bit of ageism. Sometimes I think it's a way because often, people finish their master's degrees and they're like 25 years old and they're in private practice. And, people who've been through a longer graduate program, I was probably 30 when I graduated. I was, it puts you through a lot of trauma actually to go through a program like that. So you do have some longer life experience, but that's it. That's all.
Yeah, I want to say, Allison, I agree with you. I think that there's a tinge of elitism in people's desire to specifically seek out a doctoral level clinician because there's not a huge difference in sort of the quality of the work. I think people feel like, oh, there's doctor attached to their name, so they must be more competent, when really, I mean, it's very, individual. There's lots of people who are super, super smart and they know all the knowledge about theory, but that doesn't always translate into building the therapeutic relationship, which is really an important part of therapy, is just basically being good and having a good relationship with your clients.
It's true. Something that I think about when people say things like this to me when seeking a referral is that they should actually think more about going to the person who's known for something. Like if I know that everybody goes to this specific person for this issue and everybody feels really good about that, I would take that over a PhD any day. And when I'm looking for people to send clients to or to give a referral to friends or family, I always go, who's the person who's known for that? Who really feels comfortable in that space and who can be the best therapist for that person because that's their niche. That I feel like holds so much more weight. Cool. All right, well then let's move on to the next one. So question for Tiffany here. What role does finding a therapist through insurance versus out of pocket play? And I brought this one up for you because I know you've done the work in like being in community mental health and now in private practice.
Yeah, well, I know, let's see where to begin. Well, let's start with insurance. I think a lot of folks I know, maybe they get insurance to their employer or somewhere else, and a lot of folks rely on that to access mental health care. And it can be really convenient because you can find a directory through your insurance provider of therapists who are in network. That's likely one of the easiest ways to find one. And so the costs will maybe be a little bit lower than paying out of pocket, depending on who you go to see. And so there's a lot more, I want to say, maybe choice for people who maybe want to use their insurance because, insurance is connected to a lot of different therapists. I guess the downsides to that is, of course, there are lots of therapists that don't accept insurance. So that can be a hindrance to some people who maybe want to access somebody who specializes in something who doesn't take their insurance. And also too, I think insurance is sort of like a third party that can sometimes interfere with with treatment. They can dictate how much they're going to pay the therapist. They dictate sometimes how long treatment can be, what treatment they're going to cover. And so there's a lot more strings attached when you're dealing with insurance. Not to say that it's bad, there's just more things to consider. With seeking somebody who maybe is out of network or paying out of pocket, it's a lot easier to kind of keep a lot more of your information confidential because there is no third party of an insurance provider involved. It's basically the therapist keeping notes. And I think from what I've seen in my experience, and I'm sure you guys can all attest to this too, a lot of therapists who are highly specialized tend to charge out of pocket because they provide a very niche sort of service. And so for people who are seeking specific therapists, they may want to consider, is this worth the investment? Because a lot of people don't really consider therapy always as an investment. For some, it's a privilege. But if we consider it sort of like healthcare, the way we consider going to a medical doctor healthcare, then people can kind of realize that the cost of it a lot of times kind of makes sense. But that's a whole other conversation about money and therapists being reimbursed fairly. And yeah, but I
That
hope
could
that
be a
answers the
day in
question.
itself. Yes, that could
Yes.
literally be a day in itself.
Yeah.
Allison, you look like you have thoughts on this. What are your thoughts about the insurance versus out of network?
I was just really enjoying hearing what Tiffany had to say about it. I am someone who takes insurance, but I also have plenty of clients who pay out of pocket because I'm not in network with their insurance, or because they just prefer to. So I was just thinking, a lot of people, when they first come out of graduate school these days, decide that they don't want to take insurance. And I think it's for privacy reasons. I also think, I like that you said parents, therapists being reimbursed fairly. That's where the fair came in. Because it's surprisingly hard to make a living as a therapist, to be really, really honest, because you come out of graduate school with tons of loans. You have to do your own retirement. You have to buy your own health insurance unless you have a partner. And you can't do 40 hours a week of therapy. Like, it just doesn't work. You would end up burned out, fried. It's not sustainable. I did that for a long time, but it's not sustainable. So I kind of have a dilemma. I feel like when people have health insurance, they should be able to use it. I want therapy to be affordable and fair. But at the same time, you're not always reimbursed fairly. And so it's just, those were all the thoughts that I was having that you saw crossing my face while I was listening to Tiffany.
Yeah. And one of the ways to get around that is out of network benefits. Can you explain those a little bit?
Oh, me or Allison?
Either one.
Go ahead, Tiffany. I don't have a ton of experience with that. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
I haven't had to deal with it often, but something that I do offer for my clients who, that I'm not in network with their insurance provider. And it pretty much is, if you are wanting to see a therapist that doesn't participate with your insurance plan, you may have out of network benefits that you can maybe be reimbursed for the cost of seeing this provider. And the provider can provide you with something called a super bill. Pretty much is kind of just showing the dates and times of your treatment. You submit that to your insurance provider, and they can decide to reimburse you for all or part of the cost. And I know some people deal with the headaches of trying to get reimbursed with insurance companies, so it's maybe not always be an easy process, but that's one way to kind of alleviate the financial burden that may come with having to pay out of pocket, being able to be reimbursed. In my practice, I do insurance and self-pay. So it's a way to kind of provide access to a variety of people, a little bit of insurance, a little bit of people who are private pay. And some people, I think Alice made this point too, have insurance, but choose not to use it for mental health because of their own personal reasons.
Sure, like privacy and autonomy and all that stuff. I don't want somebody telling me how many sessions I can have.
Yeah, exactly. I don't blame them.
And when I was a therapist, I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
When I was a therapist, I did specifically just out of network reimbursement, and Laura does a lot of the same. And the reason being is that it kind of works to the benefit of both the therapist and the client, because the therapist can then charge the rate that's appropriate for their services, and the client can also get reimbursed for that. But the one thing that we specifically say at the Wellness Collective is to speak with your insurance first.
Yeah.
Actually call them up, find out how much they'll reimburse and how often you need to do it. What do you need to provide so that when it does start the process of doing that, you know exactly what needs to happen, who the email is going to, where the documentation needs to be, and you get your money back really quickly. So it can be mutually beneficial.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
I agree with that, although the deductibles have gotten high lately. And
This
so
is why I quit being a therapist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the out-of-pocket deductible. So a client may have to pay for the first $1,000 that year, 5,000. I don't know.
And then it
I just
resets every year.
and
Yeah.
then it resets every year.
This-
So perhaps we could give you some resources, Danielle, because another way to make therapy, I love the word that you said, Tiffany, which is accessible, I think
Yeah.
is the word you used.
Mhm.
Most therapists have a sliding scale and have a certain number of slots in their schedule that are pro bono, which means very low fee. And then there are places, I know IPT is one of them in Philadelphia, the Institute for Psychoanalytic Thought, I think it is. They actually offer free analysis for, it's usually people who are homeless or people who are really living in a marginalized way. So maybe we can get some of those resources to you, Danielle, that you could put in the comments of the Facebook group, because
Absolutely.
I just feel so torn about this issue. I am a single mother and I need to make a
Same.
living, right? And so you're like, oh, am I really going to make my budget this month?
Yeah.
Because I want my services to be accessible and I don't want it to be just for people who can pay, a super.
Absolutely. And there are
Yeah.
other places in the city, like Council for Relationships, where Tiffany, Laura, and I all did our internship, that you can see a therapist for sometimes $0, sometimes a low amount, like $5 or $10 a session. And even though they're pretty green in their work, they are being watched like a hawk, including video recordings of the sessions,
Oh yeah.
specifically of the therapists themselves, to make sure that the therapy is really high quality. So you have someone who is like a very high up person in the food chain at a huge business, because Council for Relationships is one of the oldest therapy groups in the country, who has 20 plus years of practice under their belt, who's watching every move that therapist makes. You end up getting great quality of care for very little money. But I know that there's always a wait list, but we can add that to the resources list too, just to put that out there.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that's something that's come up recently too about, I've seen people talk about how, they can't find a therapist that has openings, or, they're not getting, therapists to return their calls when they inquire about, scheduling an appointment. And so I know now there's been a surge in the demand for therapists, but I also know there's a lot of therapists who are filled to the brim, or just maybe just cutting down on their clinical work. I know I'm somebody who's kind of pulled back in this year. So I think it's really important to, I know this can be frustrating for some folks trying to find a therapist, but don't give up, because there's lots of good therapists out there who are taking clients.
Absolutely. And if you're unsure of where to find those people, you can reach out to any of us and we can point you in the direction of those people.
Sure can.
All right, well, then let's move to the next question. And this one's for Laura. If someone starts seeing a therapist, but doesn't actually feel a connection to the new therapist, what do you suggest they do?
Oh yeah, this is a tough one. And we were all talking about this earlier as well. So I'm definitely I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on this. But my personal take on this, somebody said this, I think it was Tiffany, about the therapeutic relationship, like that therapeutic alliance is probably like the most important aspect of the experience of the therapy, feeling safe and that you can trust that person, like this connection that you are having with this person is so important. Now, it's not always guaranteed that like whoever you found, you found a therapist online or through a friend or whatever, is that person that you sit down with for the first time is going to be that person. You just may not feel aligned. You may not feel connected. I like to be really transparent about that. If that happens, one, it's normal and it's totally okay. And I really try to encourage people. And I very much understand, because like I go to therapy, and as a client, like I understand it's a little bit intimidating to talk to our therapists about this kind of thing. But I try to encourage people, one, if you don't want to necessarily give up on it yet, and you kind of feel like this could be better, like this is going okay, but it could be better. Like, are we the experts? Sure. Yeah. But you're the expert in your own life, and you are co-creating this experience with us. Like, we're going to provide you with a treatment plan and give you our expert opinions and, that what modality to use, but but I want you to co-create this experience with me. And that means also giving me feedback and giving me suggestions. Like if there's something that is really working or not working for you, I want people to feel comfortable in doing that. Granted, I know like saying it doesn't make it so, and it can be a little uncomfortable. I tell people like, email me if you don't want to say it to my face. But if you're ready to move on, and that's normal as well, like it's just not the right fit. Again, I really encourage people to feel comfortable in telling me that, because I'm sure you guys can all agree on this. Like my ultimate goal, the most important thing to me is my clients' well-being and that they get the care that they need. And if that is not with me, that is totally okay. We should not be taking it personally. I realize like there's probably therapists out there that do. Most of us don't. So please don't be afraid to tell us that, because we're talking about, like Danielle said, hey, if you are having trouble finding somebody, reach out. We all have referral networks. Like we all know one another, know of one another. I'm going to have gotten to know you a little bit, know your personality, but also know what you're looking for. I'm going to be able to refer you to somebody, and it's going to make that process so much easier. So you don't have to go back to the drawing board and start over again. Like I don't want somebody to have to do that after they went through all the trouble and the courage of starting with me to begin with, of feeling like, well, shit, this isn't working. And so now I just need to start over. Really feel, I hope you feel like you can talk to me about that. And I am 100% going to help you find somebody who is not only taking new clients, I know that they are, I know that they're starting, they can start with you right away, that they're going to be a good fit. Like I said, it can be a little intimidating to tell your therapist that to their faces. I get it. If you really don't want to say it to us, just send me an email. Like don't ghost us and then go out there and start over again, because a lot of people get discouraged and they just like throw their hands up and they're done with it. But it's tough, and finding the right therapist, finding the right connection is super important. So don't settle for anything less. And I'm okay with it if that means it's not me. But I would love anybody's thoughts on this.
Yeah, I was going to add, I've encouraged, clients to, try to give it, I want to say 3 sessions, maybe. I mean, it can vary, because the first session, the intake can definitely be awkward, and it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to dictate how therapy is going to go throughout. I tell my clients that, you're basically sharing these very intimate parts of your life with a stranger. So that's not easy to do. And sometimes it takes time to really fully open up and be vulnerable. So that doesn't always happen in the first session or even the second or third session. So it takes time to build that that rapport. And I understand that most people, when they're coming to therapy, are seeking relief from whatever is causing them distress. So they want to see, results. But, therapy doesn't necessarily work like that. It takes time to really, open up and really dig into, all the things that are contributing to the issues at hand, but also getting comfortable in therapy with the therapist and feeling like that's a good fit. In best case scenarios, you find a therapist on the first try and things, work perfectly. Sometimes you may have to shop around, and that's not always feasible. But I definitely do agree that people should try to be as patient as they can. And if they find somebody who perhaps is not a good fit, keep looking. Don't let that one experience be the thing that, makes you swear off therapy forever.
I'm glad you said that about giving it a couple sessions, because that is important. Like you hit the nail on the head. We are asking people to come to us and just open up about like their deepest, most difficult, vulnerable parts of themselves. Like that's very hard to do. There's going to be a little bit of discomfort in that in the beginning. And like you said, the intake session, we're trying to get a lot of information. It can feel overwhelming, and it hopefully doesn't, but it might feel like cold. That is not an indication of how the rest of therapy is going to go. So if you can kind of try to like hang in there, but look, if it's not going to be a good fit for you eventually. And is she talking to us?
Oh, nope. I think it's like dating, like
Yeah.
If you give it 3 sessions and you're like, nah, it's not good, and you thought it was going to be at first, like everything looks good on the outside and they're saying all the right things, but it doesn't feel like it in your body, just like with dating, it's okay to go to somebody else.
Mhm.
Or the reverse, to feel like it's not going to be right and find out that you end up loving your therapist and you weren't going to expect to. If you didn't take those 3 sessions, you wouldn't have found that out.
That's a good point too. And I also think that, there can come a time where you could work really well for a therapist and you may need something different because that therapist is taking you as far as they can take you. And
Yeah.
so you decide to change therapists or decide you want to take a break from therapy. There really is no one size fits all on how to have successful therapeutic experience.
Yeah, Allison, do you have any thoughts on this too?
Yeah, the one thing I would add, and I did a podcast interview on this topic, and so everything you guys have said are things that I was thinking as well. But the one thing I would add is that um, part of the selection process is to be choosy from the beginning. And so when I give people referrals, I try to give them 3 names. And I encourage them, if they have the courage to interview or talk on the phone to at least 2 of them. And like you said, pay attention to your intuition, pay attention to yourself, because I shared this before we hopped on the live, that I've broken up with 2 therapists over my time. And one of them, I was with her for maybe 3 years. And within the first 3 sessions, I was calling my dad and saying, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, maybe she's fine. And it is like dating. Like if you at the end of the 3rd date, you're like, I don't know. That's not good enough. This is your intimate person. This is, besides your partner and your best friend, this person holds your deepest, darkest secrets. So by me being kind of meh and then staying with someone for 3 years, it actually became a destructive process for me. Um, so I am pro breakup and move on. But I am also pro talk it through with that person, because they specialize in relationships and emotions. So if nowhere else, you should be able to say, something doesn't feel right, or I notice I'm not getting to things that I thought I should talk about, or I wish you would ask me more questions, or I wish you would push me more, or I wish you would listen more, or, this is the place to practice those relationship skills.
I'm so glad that you said that. I find that so often people stay in unhealthy relationships, including unhealthy therapeutic relationships, for far too long. And then they feel sour to the idea of therapy. Like I went when I was a teenager, I never clicked with my therapist. It didn't go well. They made me feel bad. And so now as an adult, that's not one of the coping mechanisms that I want to use, when it could be one of the most beneficial things that you ever do for yourself, but only if you let yourself be choosy and trust your gut. It's so important. All right, cool. Let's go on to the next question then. So this is one that's for everybody and right on topic with what we were just talking about. What do you think is important for people to consider when they're looking for a therapist? So let me start with Tiffany for this one.
See, most important things. Well, I mean, of course, somebody who is, I want to say licensed, but I know some people also do see interns or pre-licensed therapists. So, somebody who is skilled and educated in the area where they say they specialize in. You want to make sure that they know what they're doing. I refer folks a lot of times to Psychology Today, because that's like sort of the place you can go to find therapists almost anywhere, but there's lots of other directories. And consider one, sort of what kind of therapeutic experience that you're looking to have, and try to find who may be able to provide that. And it's kind of hard to tell that through looking at somebody's profile, but I like Allison's idea of calling around the different places, maybe doing sort of like a phone interview or just finding more information to kind of find more out about fit before scheduling a session. Of course, also insurance, location. Some people I know are sticking with telehealth, but some people also want to do in person. So I say you're more prone to want to commit to therapy when it's easier to access. So if you're gonna go in person, find somebody who is easy to get to, convenient to get to. And
Like
then
the
also,
gym, you won't go if it's not convenient.
exactly, that's where I got that from. because it's so true, and I think also considering, what you hope to get out of therapy, like what exactly are you hoping to accomplish?
That was all good. All right, you guys, any thoughts?
Oh, I feel like she really nailed all of the things I was thinking about. Location, I was thinking about that. And now, like she said, a lot of therapists, including myself, are really sticking to the telehealth, which actually does provide more option. Like if you, I mean, there's so many therapists in Philadelphia, for example, if you live in Philly, but you don't, if you're willing to go virtually, for example, or if you prefer it, some people do prefer, you can look for a therapist. Like I have clients now who are from the far reaches of Pennsylvania, who like never would have come to see me before if they were really only looking to come into the office. So if you're willing to sort of work virtually, I know some people really prefer to work in person, totally understandable. Therapy's probably always going to be maybe preferable in person. However, virtual therapy works. I mean, maybe I'm biased, but it works amazing. I think it works really well, but it provides a convenience for a lot of people. So if you're on, and also like I think a sense of sort of safety, you can talk about all these really scary things in the comfort of your own home. You can hang up, shut your laptop, and like you're in your own home, your four walls, and that feels really good for a lot of people. But if you're kind of averse to virtual therapy, but you have never done it, maybe sort of explore that. Like why so averse to it? Maybe give it a try because you probably will be surprised.
Love
I
it.
think I would add in that, I mean, you definitely at baseline want someone who's competent and ethical, like absolutely. That's where you start. And then I just really like, I don't know, I like a fit. I like a good fit with somebody. And so in the first session, you just feel like, oh my gosh, I could talk to this person forever. I could probably say anything, maybe today. And you feel like you can hit the ground running. That's a fit. That's like a home run. And if you don't have that, I don't know, like, why wouldn't you just keep trying and looking?
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you added that point. And something I will say to this is most therapists have been on a podcast or have hosted a masterclass on YouTube or have done an event like this. You can hear them speak and you can feel their energy immediately. So you can save yourself a little bit of time that way before you even have that first phone call. All right. So next question, Tiffany, this one's for you in particular. If someone wants to have a therapist who's a person of color, or if there's someone who's LGBTQI or polyamorous, are there any resources available for those specific things for them?
Yeah, there actually are a couple of different directories specifically geared towards LGBTQ plus folks and POC folks. One that comes to mind is, I want to think, is it called inclusive therapy or
I'm pretty
inclusive?
sure. Yeah. And we can
Yeah.
put these all in the comments below.
And of course, therapy for Black girls is
The best.
one I've had a relationship with for a couple of years now. But there's a whole bunch, and I think even if you were to go to one of the big directories, let's say Psychology Today, you can always kind of put in preferences, if you want a therapist who shares an identity with you, which a lot of folks do, you can always look for that. And I know that's something that comes up a lot with people that, they want to see somebody who is Black or somebody who's, a woman and shares their gender, shares their experience in some ways. But, I also encourage folks to try to look for people that are not just like them, but also maybe have had similar life experiences or specialized in certain areas in which they've had, certain traumas or experiences in, because we tend to be drawn to folks who are like us in some ways. But sometimes there's a lot more that you don't learn about someone until you really get a chance to sit and talk to them. And I like what you said, Danielle, about kind of how you can see therapists. You can see all of us speak in our energy and our personalities in events like this. This is very similar to how I show up in therapy,
Yep, it's totally true. And I think if you can find those people, like let's say you go on Psych Today and you put in those parameters for like, I want someone who is specifically of this faith because I'm going to talk a lot about those kind of issues. I want to feel like that's going to be a thing. Look for those people online and find them and see how they feel. see how it feels to be in their energy. But I do think that we're lucky living in a city like Philly because we have directories like that, because we actually have a ton of therapists in the area. So there's just more options here than if you were to live in, say, like middle of PA, like somewhere like Scranton or Erie, like up off in the distance.
Oh
We
yeah.
do
And
have
that,
that ability.
oh, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm
No,
sorry,
you're
Danielle.
fine.
I was gonna say to I think it was Laura's point about, telehealth. It does allow us to provide more access to folks for people who may not be able to have, a big pool of therapists to pull from in their community. So that's a great way to maybe find a therapist who's not in your immediate geographical area. You can, find out if they offer telehealth services, which I mean, most of us do now.
I know this really, the pandemic changed things, which is cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so
One
question.
other thing,
Oh, yeah.
sorry, Daniel, one other thing, and I'll send you this resource, that psychologists, there have been some new interjurisdictional laws passed, and it's accelerated in the last 2 years, but psychologists can actually practice across state lines.
Oh, that's good.
And yeah, I mean, not the whole United States, but there's, more and more states that are joining. So I'll send you a resource called PsyPact, which will show, you can look at a map, and if you like, somebody in Delaware, you live in Pennsylvania, but you like the psychologist in Delaware, you can now often practice across state lines legally.
Oh, that's awesome. I
I
Yeah.
hope
hope
that they
that's
broaden
right.
that.
Yeah, me too. I know there was a lot of reciprocity during COVID and stuff like that for people who like, I know that I had clients who were living in New Jersey or
Hmm.
Delaware or even Maryland who would see me in Philly because they came to my office in Philly and that was fine. But once we were in the pandemic, it wasn't fine anymore. So I think we're going to see more of that unfold. Yeah, Allison, if you could send me that resource, that'd be great.
Sure.
Okay, Allison, sticking with you, you're a Reiki master. Do you ever utilize energy working in your practice? And if that were something a client was looking for, I feel like that's a little bit harder to find. Like there's not a specific drop down on Psych today that lets you choose energy work. How could they find something like that?
Hopefully that's yet. Hopefully at some point
Yeah.
we will have more integrative holistic treatments. I am a Reiki master, and I actually do practice Reiki with some of my clients during a therapy session. It's not, Reiki is not covered by insurance. So with my insurance paying clients, they either have to schedule like a completely separate 30 minutes or something like that. I've gotten really good at distance Reiki because I was certified during the pandemic. So the only people that I've done hands-on Reiki with are my two children. But yeah, it works great actually as part of therapy. And typically what happens is a client and I will talk on Zoom or on the phone for a little bit, maybe 10, 15 minutes about how their week has been and set intentions for Reiki. And then I will send them some meditation music. We'll both, turn off our cameras, and I'll send them Reiki energy maybe for 20 minutes. And then we'll hop back on Zoom and process, what occurred and what happened. I have found it's really helpful for clients, obviously clients who are open to spiritual things. And I've literally have clients say to me, hey, I was at a crystal shop and I learned about Reiki. Do you know anybody who does Reiki? And I'm like, actually, yes. I mean, that's sometimes how it gets started. But what I found is that some of my clients feel things deeply in their bodies, but they have a hard time putting their feelings into words. And so through the process of clearing their energy field bit by bit through Reiki, they will sometimes have the same download or the same insight that I have while I'm in my office, sending them Reiki energy. And it's amazing. One woman was feeling really stuck. She's usually really, knows herself very well, but she was feeling very stuck. And we both, hopped back on the phone after 20 minutes, and she said, it's about we'll say partner. It was about my partner. And I said, that's what I got to. And then we, really were able to move the therapy forward. So I love being able to blend the two. I absolutely love it.
That's so powerful. I'm glad that you're able to do that. And I like that people are leaning more into the various holistic options that there are now. Obviously, I love that.
Yes. And if somebody is looking for that and their therapist doesn't do it, most therapists these days are open to it. So most therapists would say, oh yeah, I know so-and-so who does myofascial release, or this person is really good if you need acupuncture, or, even if they don't practice it, most practitioners at this point have referrals they can give you.
It's
Yeah.
true. We have so many resources nowadays.
I
So
did my
much of our
Reiki level 1 in October, so I'm hoping to incorporate more of that into my practice as well.
Mhm. I do think it's the way of the future, is like all of us kind of leaning into more of these things, but I have a specific view on this, obviously, and I'm biased.
Well, and Tiffany, you specialize in trauma, so all most of this stuff is stored in our bodies.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I think Reiki is a great supplement to things like EMDR and even some of the trauma conscious yoga I've been doing. I find that there's a lot of sort of overlap between like Reiki and some of the other somatic work that I've been learning about. And I really think that, because I think about the way insurance is set up to sort of be like a medical model, and mental health is much more, I think, nuanced than that. So we have to consider the fact that our minds and our bodies, they can't really be separate from each other. They each affect one another. So the fact that we have sort of a separate sort of field for treating the mind and then a separate field for treating the body, it kind of feels like there's a disconnection there when they should be more integrated. I think we're getting better with that. I know a lot more places are kind of doing integrative healthcare. So, but
Hopefully insurance kind of picks up the pace with getting along with that too.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, then next question is for Laura. On top of being a therapist, you're also a life coach. How do the two differ, and how would somebody know which one to see?
This is a great question. I feel like, I don't know, especially coaching, life coaching and coaching in general has become very popular. And unfortunately, like I think we all know, I don't think therapy still does tend to have sort of a stigma behind it. Hopefully that's not going to be the case, soon moving forward, but I do both. So there's a couple things I want to touch on about that. One, and this is not at all like a knock on coaches in general, but there's a lot of people out there who, like, to be a coach, you don't have to have any type of schooling, licensing, accreditation. You can just decide to be a coach and whatever the thing is that you want to do. Again, not a knock on coaches, but therapists are going to, we have to have, some sort of a graduate degree, a master's degree, doctorate degree. We're going to be licensed, accredited. Coaches may hold certifications, but they are not going to have all of these other aspects. And so I'm obviously biased, but I think if you can find somebody, because a lot of therapists also offer coaching now, and if you can find someone who does both, you might be a little bit better off, just because you're going to kind of have like all of the sort of the things that come with the therapist backing them up, like the license, the ethical board that they have to, we have standards that we have to uphold and things like that. But again, not at all to knock coaches, I promise. But some of the main differences, I would say coaching, you're really meeting the client like right here in the present moment and focusing on the future. Whereas a lot of therapists, we are going to explore your past with you and how that has informed your present and how we can work through that to sort of change and work through your future. I think that kind of scares a lot of people, like, oh God, do I have to talk about my family crap? Yes, I mean, at least with me, but like just to kind of give me a very nice background of who you are, where you come from. Therapists are really going to focus a lot on patterns, behaviors, themes in your life that a lot of them sort of derive from like past relationships. And we use that, right, like I said, to sort of inform how to help clients kind of lead like a happier, healthier, more productive life. We also, a lot of therapists, we sort of use this term as like we sort of act as a mirror to kind of help the client reflect. Like we really believe that you have in you what it takes to lead your best life, and we are here to really help you through that. So we are going to try to really act as a mirror to sort of reflect back probably what you already know, or what we can really help you learn and identify about yourself and about these patterns. Whereas like coaching, is going to be more goal oriented, where it's like action plans and steps. Not that therapy is not goal oriented, because it definitely is. But there's just that kind of stark difference between the two. Therapy, I might have said this, but it's going to be like a little bit more introspective, kind of really uncovering whether it's like familial patterns or past relationship patterns, themes. Whereas like, yeah, coaching is kind of coming in with an issue and creating action plan and kind of moving towards that goal. And so coaching can, I think, be a shorter, more concise process, where therapy, like some people are in therapy forever, totally depending on the person. What else do I want to say about this? I know I'm going to kick myself if I'm forgetting a lot of this. Oh, obviously, like in terms of how to pick one, right? First and foremost, like, what are you looking for? What are you needing either a therapist or a coach for? And like really go off of that. For example, if you are needing to work on trauma, please go see a therapist. Please don't go see a coach. Please see a therapist, who, and preferably somebody who is trauma focused or trauma informed, and like sort of the specialty of what you're looking for. In terms of coaching, I am also, I am certified in integrative medicine, and all that sounds like really fancy and important, but all that means is I'm not a doctor. I am not a doctor. It just means that I have done training in how, basically, like really putting it bluntly, is like how our diet or food and nutrients and like vitamins and things like that affect our mental health. Whether we want to believe it or not, our mental health is very much impacted by external things like exercise, whether or not we do that, our diet, our lifestyle, things like that. I can work on that in therapy as well, but it's probably something as a coach that I'm going to kind of drill down more into that. There's there's obvious differences. Like a therapist is really going to focus more on sort of mental illness, any type. Like if you want or are interested in becoming diagnosed, you have to go see a therapist. A coach is not going to be able to do that for you. Coaches are not able to bill their services through insurance. We talked about insurance and out of pocket. So they are always going to be out of pocket versus therapists. I'm forgetting like a million things. So anybody else?
No, you covered a lot there. That was a lot and fantastic. Really, really good information. So don't worry. And if anything came up tonight that you guys are like, oh, I should have said that, we should add that in, we can always throw it into the comments chain beneath so that we can add in those things. Because I do think we can go on the list forever about the differentiations between a therapist and a coach. And some of them are true and some of them are true sometimes. It depends on who it is that you're seeing. So that could be in itself a whole nother panel discussion.
That's true. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Let's end this with one more question that I'm going to kind of kick around to everybody, and this will be how we end the night. So the question that I have, and anyone can choose to start, is there anything that hasn't been mentioned that you wish people knew about finding a therapist?
Ooh. Oh, this is just one small thing. And I thought about it when we were talking about insurance, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize this, but in sort of getting creative about how to make that investment. Tiffany, I love that you call therapy an investment, because it is, into your mental health and well-being. But you can also use, almost always, you want to check with your therapy provider, but you can use your HSA or FSA card to pay for your sessions. Often, a lot of people don't know that they can do that, and that can be really helpful.
I meant to say that too. I'm glad that you said that. I thought it and then I forgot it. So I'm glad it's back. And people use them all the time for therapy.
Yep, absolutely. One thing I would suggest is asking around your friends and family members for their experience in therapy and if they have any referrals. I actually, this is a little bit unconventional, but I do it very carefully. I actually will take clients who are friends of other clients, as long as they are not, roommates or best friends, or are going to need to talk about each other in therapy. I came from a very strict psychology background, which is like, you absolutely don't do that. You refer them out, never, ever, ever. I have even at times seen a family member when a previous family member is completely done with therapy. And the reason I suggest asking your friends is that they know you, they know their therapist, they know that you might be a good fit or not. They also trust their therapist. So the therapist will have a thorough conversation with the current client and ask, like, how do you actually feel about this? And do you anticipate anything coming up? And if there's any shadow of a doubt, then that already known therapist can make the referrals. So you'd be surprised how many people are in therapy. Go ahead and ask. And if it's not your friend, it's your friend's cousin who can't stop talking about her therapist. And, it's just like, share the love, really.
Absolutely. Amazing advice. I've had whole friend groups come before, and not necessarily the best friend clique, like the school friends where we don't really talk about each other. And it's been some of the deepest therapeutic relationships I've had, because I, as the therapist, have a deeper understanding of that microcosm that they exist within, their little world that they have. It makes it easier to go deeper.
I would say that one thing that came up for me is just try to be honest in therapy. I've had clients that will say, I was afraid to tell you this because I thought you were going to think, and it's just like, this is what
No.
therapy is for. It's for you to be vulnerable, to be your authentic self, and not fear there's going to be some judgment. And so be honest, and don't feel like you have to censor yourself with your therapist. I know some people feel like they were going to report them and get them committed, and no, just it's because therapies aren't going to be beneficial if you are, not honest with yourself and honest with the therapist. So try to get the full experience of it.
Thank you for that. This has been amazing. You guys had incredible insight. I'm sure everyone's going to benefit from watching this back. I'm going to make sure that everybody's information is posted below, but if you guys want to just go around quickly and just let people know where it's best for them to find you, let me start with Allison.
Well, I'm doing teletherapy right now, based out of media, and may at some point have an office in Philadelphia again. And I don't have a current website for therapy. I had a spiritual Airbnb. So that's my only website. I would say just call my number, and we can put it down in the chat. I'd be happy to answer questions. I love matchmaking. So if I'm not the therapist for you, I love matchmaking. So let me help. Yeah.
All right, Tiff, how about you? Where can people find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at This Is Tiffany Renee, and the link in my bio will take you to all the various things that I offer and what I got going on. And I'm usually pretty active over there, so you can catch all my posts.
Perfect. Thanks, Tiff. And then let me go over to Laura. Laura, how can people find you online?
Yes, hi. You can also find me on Instagram at Therapy with LB. Also, our Instagram page at the Wellness Collective, Wellness PHL, our website, wellnessphl.com. My number and my email address are both on that site, as well as our other practitioners. But like Allison said, I love matchmaking too. Like, I've had some people who have come to me, but then we sort of quickly realized like it wasn't going to work for whatever reason. I am psyched to find you the right therapist. Like, I don't want you out there having to start all over again. So if you just have questions for any of us and you don't want to necessarily start with us, like, please reach out. We love to be helpful and answer your questions.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, and Tiffany, you said Psychology Today. I don't want to speak for all of you, but I am on Psychology Today as well.
Oh yeah. I'm there too.
But I guess more specifically, like, you can find us, at our sites and our Instagram.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, every single one of you, for hopping on and being such amazing resources for all of the women of the Walnut Club and the Wellness Collective followers who are watching tonight. We knew somebody's dog or kid was going to make noise at some point. And thank you guys again. And this replay will be up forever. So if anybody has questions as they're watching it, just comment right below and we're all happy to answer. Have an amazing night and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.